You can't teach imagination, you can aid imagination.
What makes a great scene?
Unpredictability. The writer Pubali Chaudhuri is a full-blown giant monster. Rock on or Kaipuch, and like, there's so many years ago, boss. I don't think others are in a position to instruct writers. I bully my way through. Writers get paid pittance, not even really that well respected.
Rock On 2 didn't resonate with audiences as much as Rock On did.
Could have to censor this entire part.
Hi everyone, welcome to TCP Originals presents Right Here, Right Now, the show where we talk to screenwriters about screenwriting. I'm Farzan Dastur, and today I'm honored to present to you our next writer. She's an award-winning writer of films like Rock On, Kaipoche, Rock On 2, and then writer-director of the short film Chitthi. Please welcome Pubali Chaudhuri. Thank you so much for coming to our show.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
Thank you. The pleasure is ours. Let's start from the very beginning, before all the films, before everything, before maybe even learning in FTII. Where was the spark of writing that came to you? You said, okay, this is something that I may be good at.
I think I was just born with it. I was born with two talents. I think I was a dancer.
Oh, lovely.
And writing was just a way of expressing yourself, all your teenage angst. And I would write copiously. And I was very fond of reading and storybooks and stories. So I think I've always lived in a world of fiction in my head. And, you know, like many kids, I would have imaginary friends. But I went to the extent of insisting that my mother feeds my imaginary friends.
Wow.
So I think living in the realm of imagination just came naturally to me. And
Fantastic.
Then writing became the way to kind of actualize it.
So how did that translate into going to FTII, studying it on a more academic level?
No, I've had a meandering path. I started when you are able to write, then the first career option that comes to your mind is more journalism. So I started with the Times of India group and journalism. Then I quickly got bored of the desk job and I did other things. I did live events production and I did ad film production. And then once I had a feel of the film medium through ad films, then it kind of came together that maybe I can combine my passion for writing with my newfound love for cinema.
Fantastic. And then right out of FTII, I think you said in another interview, you were fortunate enough to land with Rock On. How was that little story, that little journey?
It was a story, as all best stories, is one of serendipity. So one of our first year graduates called Aditya Kriplani, who is also an independent filmmaker himself, he was working with the director Abhishek and kind of knew of a concept that he wanted to be developed around a music band. And Aditya knew that I was into rock and roll music, and he happened to connect me to Abhishek, and we met, and that's how it began.
Fantastic. I will come to that writing journey. I'm going to skip forward because you have such a vibrant role in teaching after a few years in writing as well. So you taught at Whistling Woods, you taught at FTII. How was it shaping the minds of our new young writers of today?
I think it's an extremely rewarding experience. Number one, my mother is a high school mathematics teacher, so I think I just have it in my genes to be like that school ma'am.
She's also a fantastic actor.
Yes, as is evident from my short film.
Yeah.
Yes. So I love teaching, I love being, but also ours is not like a classical subject, right? It's not, and neither is it school, you know, it's a postgraduate level of training. Actually, at Whistling Woods, it's undergraduate. But nonetheless, you're talking to adults, you're talking to young minds who have sought to become filmmakers, writers themselves. And so it's not taught very conventionally, right? It is not, it's a subject of praxis, right? It's not just theory. It's not film studies. It's not just an academic approach. It's how to write.
Similar to dance in a sense.
Right. It's any kind of practicing art and craft, right? So teaching of that is vastly different from, say, teaching like an academician in any other subject. So I think it's the best teaching experiences are when it is participatory, when I have students responding to me, raising queries or even challenging me. And the best thing about it is that I learn. I don't know what the students learn, but every time I teach, I learn some aspect of my art a bit more.
As you mentioned, these courses are not exactly, they're slightly different. Can you help us with something, one or two things that are really different about how writing is taught, especially when you were there?
Yes, because I think further in our conversation, when you ask me things like, how do you write a good character?
Yeah.
There is not a single book anywhere in the world which will give it to you like a, like a formula.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
I mean, yes, there will be some principles, there will be some exercises or some ways that you can approach it.
Yeah.
But to have a very precise answer, it's a subject that exists in not knowing. When you're writing, you're discovering. You don't come really with preset knowledge. I will write this fantastic thriller now.
Yeah.
You come with an intention and the rest of it is discovery.
Yeah.
So in that sense, I think it would be different from any other knowledge systems, academic knowledge systems like say history, sociology or STEM subjects. Yeah.
I read somewhere that it's so similar to carpentry, where actually you're giving the writer just a few tools.
Right.
And then, of course, what they do with those tools is very individualistic in a sense.
Right.
That's something that was a good comparison, I thought.
Yeah. I think that's a question that's asked often. Can you teach writing? What you can't teach imagination, you can aid imagination.
Yeah.
But also it is a kind of technical writing. Screenwriting is an extremely structured technical writing, and part of it is based on principles or generally theory of narratives, right? So that helps to understand, like to give some method to the madness.
Fantastic. And then coming to your latest part of the journey where you switched to, or at least you experimented with short film writing. Having written such long format work, was short film different for you? Was it part of the curriculum, so it was more something you already did before? How was that experience?
If I'm not mistaken, it might be the very first short film that I ever wrote.
So then,
unless I wrote something in college as part of a mass comm course. No, short films were not part of our syllabus when I was a student. We were very focused on the long form writing. Subsequently, our course has changed and students also write short films. So I think Chitthi, the short film that I wrote was, for all practical purpose, the first time I was trying a short format. And just by the length of it, it's a breeze. 20 pages. I can rewrite it 60 times. It's okay. It's just 20 pages.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So we'll dive deep into that as well. Let's get a little academic here, and let's start with how does a story begin? So you're staring at that blank page. Maybe you have an idea in your head. How does it begin?
Most commonly for me, I have a character.
Okay.
Most commonly for me, I have a sense of a character whom I'm exploring. And it starts from there.
Okay.
In a couple of situations, like in one of my spec scripts, it started with an image because I saw a picture and I wanted to build a story around it.
So that was going to be my next question. What comes first, plot or character? So you answered that. So then once you flesh out that character first, or does it get into plot immediately?
I think it's an organic process. You definitely need to have a sense of the character. At the course, we do it in a much more structured way. We were taught, and I have subsequently taught myself for new writers to write a character sketch, and that really helps. And it's kind of partly from the Hollywood manual style of teaching screenwriting, but having said that, it does help to think of a character biography. Where is my character coming from? What would be her or his formative experiences? Which class, which region, which caste? All of this matters. And then what career, or just naming of a character is a terribly tough process.
Sometimes it takes time.
Yeah, because, Akshay, Ajay, but who? Akshay from where, Ajay from where, or, what kind of family? So it helps to know that biography for sure. I don't really write character sketches, but it's a preparatory work that I do before I start writing story, maybe in my head. And then you start following the character and map them into the incidents that you're exploring.
Lovely. So now you have a character. And now plot would be the next ideal step. As you said, they go hand in hand. But how do you plot it out? Is the 3-act structure something you start thinking from already here, or does that come in later?
I think you follow story first and you try and stay true to what is the organic process of following this character? What am I testing him or her on? Because typically your characters are being tested on something,
Absolutely.
whether it's external or an internal level of conflict or whatever it is. So you stay with the character and see what are the most interesting incidents that can happen around him or her that would give rise to a sense of a dramatic journey. So I would say you do story first and only then you start really plotting it. Structure by now comes inherently to me.
course.
I'm programmed to kind of know more than just 3-act structure, which is a typically limited way of looking at narratives, although it works. It is the classical grammar. So it does work. And I have internalized it so much that I sometimes fear that I'm going to give me any premise, I'll give you the, the plot point 1 and the plot point 2. So I think after years of practice, it becomes more about, are you just falling back on your default, hardwiring of how to craft a story? Or do you still have an original entry into it or something that comes unplanned,
Right.
Can you surprise yourself? I think that's kind of interesting for me.
Are these formulas or are these things about structure more Western thought that kind of came here? Because originally the literature about these is fairly Western, so to speak.
I think India has a very strong storytelling tradition and its own oral traditions, and the forms of which can be, of course, I like saying folk tales and fairy tales are one of our original stories.
Of course.
And they have an element of magic realism and they may not follow very formulaic structure, but the idea of going from an equilibrium to a disequilibrium, I think that is very ingrained into storytelling across cultures. So I think there's reason to understand the Hollywood manual kind of screenwriting books beyond treating it like a manual and trying to understand the rhythms of dramatic storytelling.
Having said that, India does have a few different things in their cinema. I, of course, know more about Hindi cinema, but it would be great if you also gave us examples from regional cinema, where we have, for example, an interval that's very different. Most of our films, or at least used to be musicals, song and dance. How does that shape into structure? Because especially when you're writing something like a rock on, where the music is more or less a character in the film.
Rock On is easy because it is a film about music and musicians, so it's not an imposition. Even if I follow characters in action, music is part of it. So it's actually one of the easier ways to plug in music, right? Because the world is that of musicians and they will be rehearsing, they will be doing shows. So that comes really, once again, from the content and the choice of characters and setup that we have. Interval, it's nothing to break your head upon. Even the classical structure allows for, or it's anticipated that there'll be a midpoint crisis, that something will happen around the middle of the journey, which is a pressure point or which makes your protagonist almost tests your protagonist, or the narrative itself takes a U-turn, right? It kind of changes its real direction or its goal. And again, I don't think you have to struggle very hard in terms of finding that. I think it automatically comes. It's just the fact that in our theatrical experience, we actually break the screening and go into whatever popcorn buying. But dramatically, that beat kind of comes fairly organically.
Coming back to music, would you say Kaipoche is a little more challenging to craft more music into the film when actually the heart of the film isn't about music?
I think in Indian culture, music plays such an inherent part. We've all grown up with music. Music is part of our festivals, and I love writing song situations. Of course, in Rock On, they were lip sync songs because they were the musician characters, but for Kaipoche, they are not lip sync songs and they're background scores. But I love writing those scenes because that's some of your best opportunities to do visual writing. So I find it actually exciting, and it still takes the narrative forward or it elaborates on a certain mood. So rarely has it felt like a very external imposition that, there's no reason, rhyme or reason. I have nothing to do here, but now for 2 minutes there's going to be a song. there's usually something to explore in that.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
Coming back to the way you're writing a film, you've got your character, you've got your plot, you have your story. Outlining is important, you would say?
I don't think there's such hardcore rules. Every writer follows their own methodology, and new writers will discover their own path. I never enter a screenplay without having written a treatment/story outline.
Okay.
More or less fairly detailed one. I mean, things may change from there on, but I do have that as a roadmap to begin with before I start writing scenes.
Just for young writers to understand, when you say detailed, this is like 20, 25 plus pages?
Yeah.
Easily?
Easily.
So you have that outline, now it's working, and now straight you dive into scene writing. So what makes a great scene?
Unpredictability. I'm always looking for a reversal for my critical scenes, something that is not expected. Say you're late and I'm angry and we're arguing, and it can go in a binary way.
Yeah.
But then what is the third point that I can arrive at, which the audience didn't see it coming, or when it comes, they have a moment of epiphany, like, yeah, right, now it makes sense.
Yeah.
And it takes the character or the story onto the next layer or onto the next level.
So you have your scenes written out, dialogue is an important part. Of course, we have our culture where we have dialogue writers.
Dialogue writing is not my ultra specialization,
Okay.
because for Hindi films, when we are doing Hindi films, I'm not the final delivery point. But general things of staying, economy is important to film. Again, related to my previous point about being expository. Sometimes characters talk in order to give information to audience, which is so evident that, no two friends would talk like this,
Yes.
because they already they've known each other.
Yes.
So how do you capture that while also plugging in the information that you do need to?
Yeah.
So that I think economy, the sense of trying to draw, take the expository layer out or hide it as much as you can. Rhythms of conversation, sometimes some great dialogue writers, like some of the Coen brother films, have great dialogue sequences and entire interrogation going with the word yeah. The cop is interrogating and the two people are just responding in yeah. So it's like also an ear for the rhythm of conversation and crafting that.
You said you wrote for more or less Bandra boy characters in Rock On. They're so different from maybe the person that you are. How, as a writer, do I ensure that I can write characters who are so far away from me? How do I write them convincingly?
Rock On is not the right example for it. I've grown up with music bands in Kolkata, and more than Bandra boys, they're musicians.
Yeah.
The story of a rock band.
Yeah.
I think Kai Poche is a better example, because the story is set in Gujarat, and that's not a culture that I inherently know well.
Yeah.
People have ambitions, people have dreams, people get angry. They have their own ways, they have their own cultural nuances. So you'd like to research, you'd like to look at work, if there are any other existing work in that area, stuff like that, and talk to people. Yeah.
I thought it was really intriguing when you said in an interview that adapting Kai Poche was actually tougher than writing an original screenplay for Rock On. You had the material, but you still felt that it required so much more effort.
Right.
How was that the juxtaposition between those two films, considering the team was more or less similar?
Like I said, Rock On was a world which I related to very well. In my college years, I was very close friends with a music band, a Bangla music band. But for Kai Poche, Chetan's book, Three Mistakes of My Life, had all the, so to say, filmy elements, and yet by the very nature of the two mediums, and because there were critical differences we had introduced in the film story from the original book, I think it took a lot more crafting. For Rock On, even though you have 4 characters, you have one predetermined goal for them. Or, well, not predetermined, but sewn into the narrative. The central question is, will they reunite or not?
Yes.
Which kind of unifies, even though there's a multiplicity of protagonists, but it unifies into the same goal.
Yeah.
And Kai Poche famously does not have an unified goal for my 3 protagonists. And that's a very fundamental problem for a script, because the story is diverging instead of converging. So structurally, it all constantly felt unwieldy. But that was the nature of story. So that's why it was a tougher negotiation, but it really taught me a lot.
What I really like is that you'll change things from the book. And one of the things you highlighted in the interview was the antagonist, the Mamaji character was actually the main antagonist in the book, but then things got turned around, which gave it a really interesting twist. How did that come about?
I think it came about fairly early into our days of brainstorming with the director Abhishek and I, and we threw around ideas and we thought this was a particularly strong idea without fully realizing how much it will change our narrative to have one of our protagonists go on to the other side.
Yes.
But it definitely made it far more interesting and nuanced and made my job tougher but also more exciting.
Speaking of antagonists, what makes a good one? We've come from, at least Hindi cinema has come from that old culture of hero-villain. Things are turning more grey in a sense. How has that switch happened and what is your take on it?
I think it depends on the nature of stories. I think even today when you have a big action masala film and there's some spy or some quote-unquote terrorist from enemy territory, they are drawn on similar lines in broad stroke villainy, the good side, the bad side. There are still very polarized portrayals. When it comes to drama, interpersonal dramas, or even say comedy, the idea of antagonism changes. There's also some internal antagonism, right? Sometimes characters are up against themselves and their own traits, so which takes more psychological exploration. And for like I'm saying, if Omi became part of the antagonist brigade near the climax, but it's a character that I'm following right through the narrative. So he's not even a villain character, so it's not really the right example. But say in a marriage story and two people in a love story or in a married relationship, if they are having a fight, then both might be antagonistic towards each other. But you as a writer have empathy for both and you understand both point of views. That I think is important. And the more the kind of story we tell different stories, the antagonist kind of changes. Right.
Does all this go out of a window when you're writing a short film of just 20 pages, or somewhere there are still nuances of a protagonist antagonist? Because when you speak about Chitthi, you start with one and then a very dramatic twist happens towards the end.
Right. I think the basic principles of narrative structuring, and I'm particularly attached to the idea of reversals, like I said. Increasingly, it's an area of fascination for me to see characters go from one end of the spectrum to another, or for audience understanding to change. Like you think this person is this, and then as the film unravels, you figure out, oh, but the character is also that.
That way, who would you say is the antagonistic force of, say, Rock On, for example? Because as you said, there are 4 characters, they do have somewhat of a unified goal. So where do the antagonistic forces lie? And is there one antagonist of that film?
No, there is no one antagonist in that film, because it's also a story about a collective. Its primary problem is within itself, So then Farhan's character Aditya and Arjun's character Joe, they are antagonistic towards each other at certain point in the backstory. Joe's wife, played by Shana Goswami, Debbie, is an antagonistic force for Joe's journey. So I think it keeps shifting, or even initially between Sakshi's character, which is like Farhan's wife's character. She also is wanting to push him in a direction which is not ready to go. So, so in terms of drama, the interpersonal conflicts are where the sense of antagonism comes from, apart from a really external villain.
Lovely. They say writing is a very lonely, isolated process, but these films that you've written, you were writing with a group of people. How was that process? How was the co-dynamics?
I think Rock On, when I write the screenplay, it's much more of a solo project, of course, with the director, jamming, brainstorming with the director, but the writing per se, I do on my own. So on my released films, the shared credit is mostly actively with my dialogue writing colleague like Shuprutekan, Kaipoche. And that's more like passing on the baton. We are not in the same room ideating the story together, right? In these 2 instances, I have passed on my screenplay draft for Hindi dialogues. right? So that's not been actively co-writing, I would say.
Yeah. How in the co-writing process do you put your ego aside? Because it's so important to not let that come into the writing process.
I bully my way through. My hairs haven't turned grey for nothing, boss. If I am in a writer's room today and if I'm not going to be able to take the final decision even there, then I might as well pack up and go. No, it's true with Bobby, my friend and colleague with whom I've been actively co-writing some spec stuff, some other commissioned web series stuff. We are both very headstrong and we are very good at fighting with each other. But I think it's a good thing. In a way, it is because of the friendship that we do not take it as a personal encroachment. We trust that if the other person has a differing opinion, he or she must have some point. Maybe I still don't agree, or maybe he still doesn't agree. Yeah. But we generally have that trust towards each other, which I think is essential to the collaborative process, not just between writers, also between writers, directors, writer, producers.
Yeah.
If we don't trust each other, we cannot deliver our best.
You collaborated with Bobby on Chitthi. How was the writing process of Chitthi? Does the director Pubali Chaudhuri come in the way of the writer Pubali Chaudhuri at any time?
No. The writer Pubali Chaudhuri is a full-blown giant monster. Like the director ko jagah hi nahi mil raha hai. Like, I'm only tugging, and I've become the director now, stop. And I think that's one of the things that Bobby kept telling me. The original idea of Chitthi comes from an idea from Bobby, the basic story, core of the story. And then he's gone on to become an intrinsic part of that project for me. And he was associate director. And I think he kept reminding me that you have to stop thinking like a writer and start thinking like a director. So, yes, I think my writer self is certainly much more pronounced. As a director, I'm just taking fledgling steps. But it has been extremely elucidating and, a learning experience to do that switch from the same words that I have written and how it kind of changes when I'm actually shooting it, what the actors bring or what maybe just an external situation brings to the thing, and my understanding of the scene has grown when I try directing it.
Right. Do you look back at your work and find it that you're criticizing your work? Any work?
I typically don't go back to my old work. For the love of me, if you ask me suddenly, Rock On or Kai Puch, I'm like, this so many years ago, boss. I don't know. And maybe they're okay now. I'm sure, but to be fair, I mean, when I look back at stuff that I'd written at the Institute or even something, I think the core idea about many of my own stories, it still appeals to me. But I can clearly see my craft I may not have been on the top of the game, or today, given the same idea, I would approach it differently. So you definitely see yourself evolve over time.
Lovely. If I explain the logline of Chitthi to someone, or maybe even show them a trailer, it gives off a slightly darker vibe than eventually turns out. Was that intentional?
I think it starts off being just a very normal day, and you think it's just going to go into this loneliness of the old woman, just the exploration of that, which was my starting point, but which was not all that I wanted the film to be about.
Yeah.
And I like the way that we could include a sense of dread. Of course, the very end note of the film has a more reconciliatory and a humane note. But that's like the ultimate end. But I think otherwise, consistently the film changes walks this thin line between being a drama, quite a talking head drama, in fact, but also there's something simmering underneath. There is something, a slight unrest, and we don't know what's really up. And there's a sense of intrigue, and that I think was always there as part of the design.
Thank you for that humane end. I really enjoyed it. I'm a sucker for positive endings, so that was really sweet. Speaking of, working on so many films, how do you deal with feedback? How do you take feedback? Who do you take feedback from seriously?
Could have to censor this entire part. I'm bound to take feedback from my collaborators in terms of the professional collaborators like my producer or my director. I like it much, much better when I'm talking to people like independent individual producers and, of course, the director. I struggle a lot with corporate executive-driven feedback, which doesn't have so much of personal insight. Or it could be just 10 people all with their personal, insight. So it's tough to kind of process that. I was very lucky to have Farhan as my producer plus my lead actor, but I think the feedback that he was giving was more as the producer, and he's so script savvy that it really spoiled me. I think subsequently the other feedback that I've had to have from people who have not written themselves, so their understanding will or not a filmmaker themselves, so their understanding will always be a little academic or not inside out. Or very seasoned producers, even in the corporate setup. Like, I would definitely give a shout out to Rucha Pathak. She's one of the best executives from a producing side that I've interacted with, who have a very deep understanding of narratives. Yeah, so I think feedback is a very essential part of the creative process. We do multiple rewrites, and that's the way to go about it. Even at our institute, we used to have our mentors give feedback. Give it that time and attention to discover what is on the page or ask us for clarifications instead of just doing like a top-down communication. I'm not really in favor of, even as mentors, we try and avoid that because it kills the creative playfulness and it takes away something from the entire creative process if you just give instructions. And professionally, I don't think really others are in a position to instruct writers. You don't instruct a cinematographer how to light. If you do not like the way it's lit, you discuss that. Okay, hey, can we do this differently? Right? And I think there's a lot of etiquette that is required in giving sensitive feedback. And I think sometimes industry people are not sensitive to that, but it's a mixed bag.
Speaking of feedback, you had mentioned in an interview that you sent the Kaipoche script to Javed Saab and he gave some very essential feedback. I'm sure all the listeners here are fans of Javed Saab. Please tell us what that interaction was like.
Yeah, it was quite a dreadful evening for us, in fact. So Gattu and I had gone and we had done a detailed narration of the script, and not that he meant to discourage, not at all. But he did point out to me that the structure is unwieldy. And he also felt that the content might be a bit too heavy at times. So he did kind of make us aware about that. But also I think after my interaction with him, I had a new way to look at structure, not because he had, and that's what I'm saying about good feedback, that you can help me identify the problem. It's best when the writers come up with their solution themselves, because we are the ones spending that much time. And of course, Javed Saab is such a senior writer, and if he did have a concrete suggestion, that would be equally helpful. But I think good feedback comes from pointing you towards where is it not resonating or where is it, going amiss. And then the writer can put on his or her thinking hat and think, okay, if this is the problem area, let me see what is the most inventive way that I can approach it. Yes.
Lovely. Rock On 2 didn't resonate with audiences as much as Rock On did. How was, and that is some, in a way, feedback from the audience. So how did you react to that?
I almost saw it coming. I knew by the time I had seen the edit that the film, to be absolutely honest, the film is not what we had hoped for.
Okay.
So I was prepared for that. I think it was a bunch of other things. It just shows how less in a position of power a writer is, because no matter what your draft is and what gets made are two different things.
Okay.
Because this film changed so much on its edit and stuff that I don't even have real feedback on the draft that I delivered. Of course, everybody works with the intention of making it right. But sometimes you overcook a meal or, a dish or whatever. Some days you're just off and it doesn't work out.
For our next segment, we have Pubali Chaudhuri, who will read a small excerpt from her short film, Chitthi. Before we begin, can you tell us where in the film are we at this point?
We're kind of nearing the midpoint. So the short film revolves around the idea that there's an elderly woman living alone at her home in Kolkata. And it's just a regular day, and a salesman comes calling in, and he kind of imposes himself because he wants to make a sale. And before this scene, we've seen that the man was left alone in the room for a while, and he would have reached out for the woman's wallet, which was lying around. After that, their conversation ensues. He manages to sell some things, and now the lady is trying to give him the money, the payment, and she can't find the wallet. So the preceding scene has been her trying to find where her wallet is.
Lovely. So let's begin. Interior living room day. Reveal. Probal is back in the living room. He walks towards the center table and moves a newspaper deliberately to pick up a worn-out wallet. He calls out,
Mashima. That's like saying auntie.
Interior living room moments later, naming. Chitthi sits down on the sofa and takes out some currency notes from her purse.
Oh, you got it? I was worried that I've lost it.
The woman hands out some currency notes to the salesman. Probal brings out a voucher pad and starts writing out the bill.
Whose name should I make this bill in?
Chitthi says,
Chithhi Chaudhuri. Wait, make it in my son's name. Shujoy Chaudhuri.
Probal looks towards the framed photo of the young man on the bookshelf. Probal says,
Is he in college? Pura din aap akele ghar pe?
Chitthi says, smilingly,
नहीं, वो कब का पुराना photo है. Shujoy would be your age, settled in US. I have a granddaughter too. How about you? Do you have kids?
So this is in a way slightly more explanatory. We're still understanding this character and the backstory of her son.
Right. So when
expositionary.
Yes, because when the salesman comes in, nobody has opportunity to tell about their life story. And now that they've spent a little time, and they've formed some kind of a bond. And as elderly people are prone to, they talk a bit more, right? And they talk a bit more than necessary. So I felt it goes with the character that she starts talking, and because she stays alone, and there's an indication of no, I do have a family, only that they stay far away. Although I would like to say that this is what the scene reads on page, but the entry point of this scene actually changes in the film. So if our listeners, audience actually ever check out the film, that'll be an interesting exercise to see how a scene evolves from the page to the screen.
Absolutely.
Whereas the gist remains the same. Anyway,
do check out the film. It's on YouTube, on Pocket Films' YouTube channel. Please check it out. It's a lovely film. Moving ahead with the scene. Probal nods with a smile as he writes out the voucher. Probal says,
the lady has just asked, do you have a kid? And he answers, Rumpi.
Chitthi says,
Oh, bas ek hi ladki.
The man now looks a bit defensive, having heard this question many times before. Probal says,
he just mumbles, Actually, the film is in Bangla, but I'm reading out in a mix of English and Hindi.
He tears out the bill from the voucher pad and holds it out for her. The old lady continues talking as she takes the bill in her hand. Chitthi says,
Don't misunderstand. I also love my granddaughter. But this one kid...
Her mind seems to be drifting somewhere. Chithi's eyes now fall on the voucher.
Oh, but the spelling is wrong.
Probal is packing up stuff from the center table. He looks questioningly at her. Now what?
Please make a fresh bill.
Probal says,
What?
She replies,
Chaudhuri. The Chaudhuri surname is spelled wrong.
Probal is a bit exasperated, but reins it in. Client after all. He forces a smile and starts writing out a fresh bill as he spells out Chaudhuri.
Chaudhur.
Sound of an alarm on Chithi's phone.
Oh, there goes my alarm.
She switches it off.
R-I, not Y. And this is where the scene ends.
What was the significance of this part of the scene where she is very particular about how the surname is spelled?
Right. I think it works at two levels. Primarily for the audience and for the film, this is like I'm saying, this is almost arriving at the midpoint of the film, but it is also exposing, doing an expository thing about the character.
Yeah.
That she's so particular, she's a bit controlling. Otherwise, who the hell cares about a salesman writing, one bill, whether the surname is spelled incorrect? But like, there's probably a backstory. She could have been a headmistress, or she could have been, it's a particular kind of person, a particular person with, really being anal about things that no. And elderly people also, or certain types can be a bit unreasonable, right? No, I need it right. Her fixation with this detailing is kind of revealing her character. And in fact, in the context of the film, this scene is really interesting because there is a sense that the salesman might have stolen some money from the woman's purse.
Yes.
So the scene begins, and the audience already has a sense of that. So the scene begins with the salesman being a bit on the defensive and trying to cover up and all of that. But at the same time, without giving out the full story of the film, this is also a key scene which we later see how it plays out in the climax. And it's a film centered around lies and deceit.
Yes.
And this is actually where I am setting it up for the climax reveal.
Absolutely.
Right. So what seems like just general rambling from an elderly woman talking a bit too much, and also showing her, personality in being very specific about, no, my name spelling has to be right, etc. But so it's a mix of exposition, whereas I also plant in very critical information, which pays off in terms of my plot.
It's a great stepping stone to what we're about to see.
Right, what we are about to see.
Please do catch this film on YouTube. You'll understand what Pubali ji is talking about. And let's move on to our next segment. Today in India, we're seeing writing evolve in so many different ways. There are so many different platforms. You mentioned that OTT is something that you're also working on. How is writing for an OTT slightly different from maybe, say, film writing? Or a series different from film writing?
I think in terms of form and content, of course, it's different. We are looking at, anywhere between 6 to 8 hours of content. So that's a lot more. The canvas is bigger. I like to approach web series stories not just by extending a feature film idea, but an idea that requires that kind of expanse. That's been my approach in terms of creatives. And of course, the episodic format. So I've almost never written for television fiction. So that's been relatively new for me to know episodic writing, and I've kind of, in a way, self-taught myself. It's been an interesting process, and I still think the fundamental principles of good screenwriting stay the same, whereas the format has changed and it has its own demands. That's how I would say it.
And speaking of new trends, AI is also, it's not on the horizon anymore, it's here. Do you feel young writers are a little more threatened today?
No, I think old writers are already dinosaurs like me and will be completely out of work. At some level, I think, and the way studio feedback goes, and so many PowerPoints and data points, at the risk of, my own career coming to a grinding halt, I think that kind of formulaic writing is best done with AI. I can't wait for executives to deal directly with AI. Just take the human thing out of the process, because it's tough for us writers not to be human, for us to act like machines. But if machines are doing such a good job of imitating us, I think that's a match made in heaven. And I'm okay to, starve to death. Or happens, technology comes. But to be realistic, I feel it'll be, or to be politically correct, let's hope that it'll be a happy match between the AI assisting us and enabling the process. And I think especially in terms of research, something that I'm currently doing, and only that I have a little problem trusting AI research. I would still rather read the source material, instead of AI kind of summarizing it for me. But it's a good 101. It's a good snapshot of, okay, what to look out for. And maybe then you do due diligence and you actually read whatever source material or get it verified. So yes, it can certainly be a good assistant. If it could take notes, it would be nice if they do that. And if the technology stays at a price point where individual writers can use it.
Yes.
Because very soon this open thing won't remain open.
Yes.
It will be monetized and it will again go in the hands of moneyed people, not individual artists, is my fear. But I'm very happy to be proven wrong.
That's great. Kaipuchi actually released at a time where things were a little more open politically. We could say a lot more. Today, such a film to be released would be very difficult. Do writers kind of bring that filter to the writing table already today, especially since you interact with young writers saying, let's not even attempt to write something like this?
Not just young writers. I think that fear is all pervasive in the industry. I think there is a very strong sense of censorship, of what will be allowed to do, what will be allowed to tell. There are controversies, dime a dozen in our line of work these days. I think it has created a very unhealthy atmosphere of no writer, filmmaker, creator feeling free to explore any ideas without dreading. I mean, we always had the dread of will it get made or not, right? Whether it will have commercial success or not. These were parameters that or uncertainties that we already grapple with. But with this really imposition of censorship, which has become very acute today, choice of subjects, stuff that we are able to say, do, even refer to passingly, everybody's internal censorship is at an all-time high, and that's not a great space to be at creatively.
Writers traditionally did not have managers, representation. Today things have changed. Even a junior writer now has a manager. What's your take on the subject? Have you ever been managed by someone?
Yeah, I have. I was, if I'm not mistaken, I'm one of the first writers to be represented by Quan.
Oh, fantastic.
Quan. And we did have a good run initially. And some of the colleagues from there are still kind of, people that I appreciate. Overall, the system-wise, I think it's great for maybe younger writers to find representation. And with all these web series and staffing of the writer's room, you can get employed.
Yeah.
I think by the time I was represented, I was already in my mid-career. Kaipuchi had already happened.
Yeah.
So I'd done the hard slog myself. And even now, thankfully, the industry, the Bombay film industry, people do reach out to you directly. So yes, I do feel that some of us manage fine on our own. And in fact, we are much more passionate about advocating for our rights than any business people.
Sure. Do you feel writers are getting paid something that is satisfactory? Do you think there's scope for improvement there?
There's always scope for improvement there. Writers get paid pittance. We are really underpaid and not even really that well respected because money is a form of respect.
Yes.
Plus, overall industry is in a slump. Budgets have shrunk. Everybody's facing pay cuts. Not really a rosy picture right now, and we can only hope that things turn around and things get better.
Are things better in regional cinema, you feel? Or especially, at least storytelling is better?
I think in regional cinema, their biggest advantage is being able to root their stories into a specific culture, whereas Bombay is a city of migrants, is also a cosmopolitan city.
Yeah.
So because people come from different places and Hindi language, we are not really catering to a specific just Hindi speaking region.
Yes.
Hindi films have always been that way, the national film.
Yes.
And so on the flip side, it's not rooted very well to any particular area, whereas regional films are able to exploit that local culture and bring out nuances very well. And, the more local you get, actually, your reach expands as well.
Any huge writers, filmmakers that you really admire here or internationally?
Yeah, a whole lot of them. For a lot of Hindi films, we don't really, in fact, I didn't notice screenwriter's name till I actually studied screenwriting and became a screenwriter. But I like doing some kind of homage or, personal salute to this gentleman called Nobindu Ghosh, who had written films like Abhiman, and a spate of other films. And I really admire his work, number one. and also because I feel he was another Bengali gentleman, and he was known back in those times also for his screenplay, and he was not a dialogue writer.
Yeah.
So I take a lot of inspiration from his work, of somebody who'd traversed similar journey. Of course, he's a legend in his own way.
Fantastic.
There's that. There's, of course, Charlie Kaufman, can't miss him. There's Shaw Cloud career, collaborating with the likes of Buñuel.
Fantastic. It's truly been a masterclass with you today. Thank you so much for sharing your journey. As a parting thought, what's next for you?
God knows. I told you right at top, because not knowing is part of the process. Of course, I'm writing things. I'm, like I said, me and my friend and colleague Bobby, we have co-written a film for Amit Masurkar, and we're just about beginning to pitch it to actors. We expect many rejections, so it'll be the process, that it is.
Begin,
Yes, and I might also be collaborating with Abhishek Kapoor once again for another project.
Lovely.
So we'll see what lands where.
Awesome. Looking forward to all this amazing work in the future as well. Hopefully, next time you come here, we can discuss those projects.
Yes,
and
hopefully I would have directed my own feature by then. That would be ideal.
Let's manifest that here today. Thank you so much for joining us. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Thank you. It was great talking to you, Parsan.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Pubali, and I'd love for all of you to please like and subscribe to this new channel, TCP Originals, on YouTube, for more such content.